$5,000 and a video ad for Facebook that was shot in a stranger's garage. 18 months later, 25,000 customers. And a private equity firm bought that e-commerce brand. That brand was Upstart Epoxy. I co-founded it. And this video is the exact playbook, the 10 components every $1 million D2C e-commerce brand needs, and in the exact order that you need to build them. The order is the part almost everyone gets wrong, and it's usually why I see people fail. Most people start at step 4 or 5, and by the end of this video, you'll see exactly why that kills them. One quick thing before step 1, actually building out these pieces in the playbook. The branding, the offer, the creative, running the ads. That is exactly what my agency Pondir does for brands every day. So if there's a piece you'd rather have built for you than tackle yourself, pondir.com, link is in the description, and that is my shameless plug. All right, here's the 10 components. Let's jump into number 1. Before product, before branding, before anything, you need to pick the arena. And I would only ever build an e-commerce brand in an evergreen niche. Evergreen means the demand has been there for decades and it isn't going anywhere. Candles, dog food, teeth whitening, hair care, all boring on purpose. Because boring means the demand already exists. You don't have to create it. You just have to capture it. Here's the exact 60-second check that I use. Open Google Trends, search for your product title, then set the chart to all time. Do you see a steady line year after year after year? That's evergreen. Build. Do you see a giant spike and a crash? That's a trend. Walk away. You don't build a company on top of a trend. Epoxy, for us, passed this test because people have been pouring resin for decades. Steady year after year. We weren't going into this betting on a single trend or a single moment. We were entering a market with proven, durable demand and just planning to do it better. So step 1 isn't a product idea. It's an arena with a heartbeat. The product comes later, and there's a reason it comes later. Now let's get into step 2. Step 1 told you the category will still exist in 10 years. Step 2 proves there's a profitable opening inside it before you spend $1 on inventory. 2 validations in order. First, are competitors actually selling? There are tools that estimate exactly how much your competitors move every month and how consistent those sales are. If you're selling on a marketplace like Amazon, that data is right there. Steady competitor sales in the evergreen niche means the demand is confirmed with numbers, not hope. Second, and this is the gate most people skip, can you differentiate? Go read the 1-star reviews on competitors' products. Amazon, their website, the web, the angry threads, the complaints, and ask one question, can I fix these? If the answer is yes, you don't just have demand, you have an opening. Remember that, because it becomes the foundation of the next step. And if you want to go further before risking real money, pre-sell. Houndsy posted a rough prototype on TikTok, 15 million views, 70,000 emails. Pre-sold on Kickstarter before the product even existed. Saturday Dumpling took pre-orders on Instagram and made the dumplings after the orders came in. Customers funded every step, and I'll own my own mistake here. With Upstart, we spent 6 months in real money perfecting the product before we truly validated it at scale. It worked out, but it was a risk that I didn't need to take. Today, I work backwards. I map everything it takes to make money from the idea before I let myself build anything. Because AI made launching a product relatively easy, but it made finishing a business rare. A product alone is not a business. You need to validate the business first. All right, let's get into step number 3. So you've got an evergreen arena and you've got the proof that people are buying. Now, before you finalize the product, you need your wedge. The reason a customer picks you over the dozen options that already exist. And the strongest wedge is almost never, I'm a little better. It's a complete reframe. Fontana Candle didn't sell better candles, they sold clean candles. No paraffin, safe around your kids. That one reframe justified a premium price and landed them on the Today Show. Super Green Tonic entered a category built on hidden proprietary blends, and made transparency the entire pitch. Every dose listed on the label. And Warmer didn't reframe a category, she actually invented one. An office chair blanket didn't exist. No competitors, no price war, there was no copycats. Warmer owned the whole thing. Upstart Epoxy's wedge came straight from those 1-star reviews I told you to read in step number 2 of this playbook. We turned every recurring complaint into a promise. The biggest one was yellowing. Every epoxy yellows over time, but competitors' projects yellowed way too fast. So our pitch became no yellowing, no bubbles, no VOCs, and made in the USA, which, in a category flooded with cheap imports, was a trust signal all by itself. The reframe wasn't cheaper epoxy, it was the epoxy that fixes everything you hate about epoxy. So ask yourself, what does my category do badly, hide, or take for granted? And what happens if I build my whole brand around the opposite? Now it's time for step number 4. Now and only now, the product. And see why the order matters? Most people start here. They build something, then go looking for the market afterwards. You already know the market, the demand, and the wedge. So you know the one thing this product has to nail. For us, that one thing was yellowing. So before we sold a single bottle, we spent 6 months now launching. We drove the manufacturers across Illinois, not to place orders, but to find who could actually build what we envisioned. Then we handled sample formulations to local epoxy hobbyists to test. Real users, real feedback, before a dollar ever changed hands. If we'd launched fast like everyone does, we would have been making claims that we could not back up. But here's the balance, and this is very important. Don't let perfect the product become an excuse to never ship. Sleepy Hat, a mom who designed a baby hat with an attached eye cover, solved one painfully specific problem and shipped it before it was perfect. So obsess over the one thing your wedge promises. Ship everything else at good enough. Vet 5 or more manufacturers, nail the core, and then move. Because the product isn't where you win the customer's heart. It's where you keep it. Where you win it, well, that's the next 2 steps. Let's jump into step number 5. Branding is everything, and to most beginners, massively underrated. Let me show you exactly how I did it for Upstart. Because every piece was intentional, and there's actually a 5-minute test that I do I'm going to show you here that you can run on your own category today. So you start with the name, Upstart, because I wanted energy around the brand. People get excited about a project they're about to make. Upstart your next project. The name had momentum in it, that feeling of starting something and watching it come to life. Then the colors, high energy on purpose, to stand out from the stale, flat branding every competitor was using, and to feed that same excitement of creating something. Now the test. Go to Amazon, search for your product or your competitor's product. Zoom out and screenshot the entire results page. Instantly, 1 or 2 products will jump out at you. Your eyes are just drawn to them. Everything else blends into a gray wall of sameness. My entire branding goal was simple. Be the one that passes the eye test. I did the design myself with the screenshot as my benchmark. If we didn't pop against the field, it wasn't done. One rule though, your look has to argue the same thing your positioning claims. Our high energy design matched our wedge, that fun, premium, made in the USA epoxy that actually works. When the look and the promise match, the customer believes you before you've actually said a word. And that's the first half of the playbook. Everything the customer sees. The next 5 steps are where the money actually gets made, starting with the one where most brands quietly lose. Let's get into step number 6. If I could only get one step of this video into your head, it's this one. You're not selling a product, you're building an offer. And a great offer answers every objection before the buyer even asks. The process has 2 parts. Part 1, find the objections. List every reason someone hesitates to buy. The best free research on the planet? Your competitors' 1-star reviews. A literal list of what makes people nervous to buy. Add Reddit and forums. Then you can even point AI at the web to pull real objections to products just like yours. They fall into predictable buckets. Price, does it actually work? Can I trust you over a near identical competitor? And for anything that they have to use, can they realistically pull it off? Part 2, answer every single one. And here's the key insight. For a physical product, the offer can simply be a better product. That was Upstart's offer. Not a gimmick, not a discount, the formula itself. No yellowing, no bubbles, no VOCs, made in the USA. Every claim, a direct answer to a complaint about a competitor's product. The product was our offer, but there's 2 objections that no formula we put together could fix. So we engineered answers to those 2. The first one being difficulty. People doubted they could pull off an epoxy project. So every purchase included a step-by-step course, fully digital, low cost to us. And then came trust, the objection which most founders tend to ignore. We answered this with real customers that look just like the buyer, succeeding with epoxy on camera. Pure UGC. A product that beat every complaint. That was Upstart. Courses that remove the fear. Proof that remove the doubt. Now that is a stacked offer. And when the product can't kill the biggest objection, change the terms. And another venture of mine, buyers couldn't judge the product from photos alone. So we built try before you buy. They pay a fraction of the price up front. They get 3 variations shipped to their home. They keep the one that they love, send the rest back, only pay for the one they kept. 0 risk. The structure killed the risk the product couldn't. So just keep engineering product and terms until every single objection has an answer on the page. And hold on to this step, because when we get to step 8, you'll see why the offer, not the Facebook ads, is usually the thing that's actually broken. Now let's jump into step number 7. For most D2C brands, paid ads are the growth engine, and the ad lives or dies in the first 3 seconds. 4 things have to land in those 3 seconds. 1, filter. The right viewer needs to instantly know that that ad is for them. Number 2, intrigue. A bold statement or a question that makes them need to keep watching. 3, a promise. Stay and you'll learn something. Be entertained or solve a problem. 4, show the product and the brand right away. Don't hide them. And if you can prove the product's benefit inside of those 3 seconds, you've already won. The biggest mistake that I see is copying a hook for an ad that worked without the pieces that made it work. Essentially cloning the structure but skipping the actual substance. And make sure to lead your ads with benefit, not with features. Every hook that flopped for me was feature driven. Every winning ad instantly proved a benefit. Want proof that you don't need a budget? The best ad that we ever made cost almost nothing. We found a local epoxy hobbyist, took our cameras to his garage, aka our phones, and filmed him completing one real project with our product. Raw and real. I cut it into a 60-second ad, and it was profitable from day one. A real person making a real thing beats a polished studio shoot almost every single time. People don't buy the gloss, they buy the proof that it works. Then we turn that idea into an engine. Customers got a discount in exchange for review photos and videos, which created an endless library of authentic content to run as ads. And next, I never want you to guess whether a hook is good. I want you to watch the link click-through rate. The data decides whether a hook is good, and the link click-through rate will guide you in the right direction. Build variations off your winners and keep feeding the machine, which brings us to actually spending money and the advice that's going to sound wrong. Step number 8, let's jump into it. Step number 8, 2 things kill more ad accounts than anything else. Targeting too narrow and misdiagnosing why ads fail. Let me fix both. First, targeting. Here's the part that sounds wrong. Stop narrowing. Go broad. The platform has more data and more AI than you will ever have. It already knows who wants your product better than you guessing at audience slices. Narrow costs you in 3 ways: higher CPMs, miss buyers just outside your slice, and a hard cap on your scale the second that audience fatigue kicks in. We ran audiences around 10 million people, and once we crossed a few $1,000s a day in spend, going wide open is exactly what improved our results. Narrow, it feels like control, but control isn't the goal here. Results are. Second, when sales don't come, diagnose them in the right order. Most people immediately blame targeting or price, almost always wrong. Start with your creative. Find the ads with strong link click-through rates and cheap cost per clicks, and then build variations off of those winners. Then read the signals. Clicks but no sales? It's not your ads. It's your offer or your landing page. And here's how to tell which. A great offer converts even on a mediocre landing page. 0 sales means an offer problem. Sales but losing money with the offer already maxed out means a landing page problem. And price, the thing that everyone blames first, if your creative, offer, and landing page are all A+, you can sell at almost any price your industry allows. And I'm about to prove that to you. Remember the number I teased at the start? Here it comes. Let's get into step number 9. How you price might be the highest leverage decision in this entire playbook, because the price isn't just revenue, it's the fuel for everything else. Price above your competitors on purpose. We launched at $94.99 for a gallon of tabletop epoxy. Our competition was at $69.99. We were the most expensive option on the page deliberately, because a higher price signals higher quality before anyone ever touches your product. And our formula actually backed it up. That's roughly a 35% premium. And here's the part nobody talks about. That fatter margin is exactly what let us outspend every competitor on ads and scale faster than they could. Here's the catch. You have to deliver. High price, bad product, dead business. Now, let's talk about the number that surprised me. We started offering bundles priced at $200 up, and the conversion rate on those bundles was basically identical to our $94.99 single product. The same percentage of people bought at more than double the order value. Everyone assumes a higher price tanks conversion. Past a certain point of trust and brand, it often doesn't. So give people a bigger, better package to say yes to, and a lot of them will. And everything so far gets you the first sale. The last step is what turns a brand into a business. So let's jump into that step. Step number 10. The cheapest customer that you will ever sell to is the one who already bought. And most beginners ignore this completely. They pour everything into acquisition and let buyers vanish. Build the backend. Email and SMS flows that bring people back. Post-purchase sequences. Real reasons to reorder. Our courses did double duty here. They killed the difficulty objection, and they got people doing more projects. And more projects means more epoxy. Now you're stacking repeat revenue on top of new revenue, instead of starting from 0 every month. Then build the real moat, which is community. The single most valuable asset we owned wasn't an ad. It was a Facebook group. We had 75,000 epoxy enthusiasts making content for us, posting it, sharing it, liking it. All in all, answering one another's questions and telling us exactly what they wanted us to release next. Avi did it with a 50,000 person group that votes on new products. A community like a Facebook group does 3 jobs at once. 1, it sells for you. 2, it retains for you. And 3, it hands you your roadmap. Customers who feel ownership don't churn. One warning as you scale: don't outsource this or your marketing too early. Boss Cow stayed stuck until they fired the chief freelancers and took their own ads back. Nobody sells your product like the person who built the brand. You need to understand why things aren't working before you outsource. So that's the playbook. 10 components in that order, and $1 million stops being a fantasy. It becomes a process. But here's the thing that makes it all actually pay off. Build the whole machine to run without you. Documented processes, a great team, numbers that you can defend in any room. That's not just how you get your life back, it's literally what made a private equity firm want to buy my company. Buyers don't buy your story. They buy a machine that works when you're gone. Build a machine. And it's not just a brand, it's an asset. If this was useful, do 2 things. Comment where you are right now, just starting, mid-build, or scaling, because the next videos get made from those comments. And subscribe, which I really appreciate. This entire playbook is actually a landing page on Pondir.com. I linked it in the description. So if you made it this far in the video, I appreciate you. And I look forward to seeing you here on the next one. Dylan out.